Yeah, and if you can help me out with the recording. Great. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to Fearless for Freedom. I'm your host, Mariam, and today we're going to be talking about a country that has become one of the most closely watched political battlegrounds in all of Europe. Today we're going to be covering Hungary. And on April 12th, just 5 days from now, Hungarians will actually be heading to the polls in what many are calling the most consequential election in the country in over a decade. And its Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, has been spending the last 16 years basically perfecting the so-called illiberal laboratory. And he's been selling it to his nationalist allies within the European Union and outside. But that model is now under its most serious challenge since the opposition parties are slowly gaining popularity, and some of the polls are suggesting that they have majority support among decided voters. So in a normal European democracy, the government that has been trailing its main rival for months would be heading for defeat, but this is Hungary, and we are going to be covering exactly this today. Why we are here is to talk about not just how Orban built what he built, but also who is challenging it, what they are offering, and whether this change is actually possible. And to cover this, we have with us Zoltan Kesz, someone who has spent years on the front lines of Hungary's freedom movement. He won a by-election in 2015, breaking two-thirds majority of the governing party in 2015. And he was in the Hungarian parliament and remained an independent until 2018. And after the life in politics, he has rejoined the world of think tanks, and he's now with the Consumer Choice Center, working as the government affairs manager. Zoltan, welcome to the series. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. I want to give you space to talk about, I think our listeners would like to understand how Hungary got here, of course, and because Fidesz isn't the party that it once was. So I would like us to talk about more about Orban, who was he, what he originally stood for, if you can take us back for a little bit.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you very much, Mariam, and thank you for Students for Liberty for having me here on this podcast. Well, to understand how he got here and where he came from, we have to go back 36, 37 years in history when he was a really young person. Back then, I remember I was a high school student when he was standing up and becoming a famous leader of the political world in Hungary, and he was very liberal. At least that's what he showed. I mean, now there are conspiracy theories that it was all a show, but he was a liberal. His party, Fidesz, was a liberal party. They were part of the liberal international movement, and he got into parliament as a leader of a small party back in 1990 at the first election that we had after the Soviets left the country. And he realized quite quickly, in about 3 years, that uh, running the liberal agenda will not take him anywhere in Hungary, in a country which is, in my opinion, very much pro socialist in thinking, that is pro paternalistic, so looking for the state all the time for help. And the liberal challenge that he wanted to, outline was just never really there. And he realized, oh, there's a niche part of the political landscape on the conservative side, and let's move into the center right. And that's what he did in the middle of the 1990s. And he first got into power back in 1998, and he was prime minister first from 1998 until 2002. And in my opinion, he was leading a quite good 4 years. So these were the years of the Hungarian history, of modern day Hungarian history, when we kind of enjoyed democracy in a way that everybody expected back then when the transition came. So even like I was also satisfied. I was just out of university, and things looked good. Also on the international scene, things looked good. However, he faced the defeat in 2002 mainly because of his arrogance and not really believing the fact that he could lose an election after such a successful 4 years. And the socialists came back. Socialists were as corrupt as ever. So when he returned to power 8 years later in 2010, he was a totally different person because he realized what it feels like to lose. And he never wanted that to happen anymore. And the way he came back was with a super majority, a two-thirds majority in the House of Parliament, which means that basically you are able to do whatever you feel like. And this is exactly what he did. And honestly, I voted for him back in 2010, as the majority of the population obviously voted for him and not the socialists. He promised things that he never delivered, and he delivered things that he never promised. And personally, when what I became disappointed with, or when I became disappointed with him, was actually just a couple of months after he took office. That's when he nationalized the private pension funds, and this is something that's you can never explain it to somebody like me who is a pro free market person. I mean, why do you nationalize something? Why do you take away people's savings? Why do you put them in the whole bowl of money where you can never even get it back? So this is how I got disappointed. And I could talk for hours and hours of what happened in these past 16 years, but I think, Mariam, you're gonna guide my hand through this and
Yes,
help me
absolutely.
with some questions.
Absolutely. What I wanted to ask you first is, you mentioned already the two-thirds majority. This is like a communist era legacy about Hungary's constitution amendment, right? And I wanted to first ask you about the Fidesz used it to pass a entirely new constitution, and what were the new election rules would be my questions. How were they rewritten during Fidesz era, and what
Okay, I hope the line is good because you froze sometimes, and I hope I'm not freezing. So if
Oh,
you
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you,
Was
and
the
I
question
guess
clear?
I have the question. I have the question anyway, so I understood most of it. So yeah, obviously changing the constitution. Yes, he intended to change the constitution right from the beginning. So he changed the constitution, changed the election law, and the election law was changed in a way that guarantees that if you have a big one party and lots of other smaller parties, that you are guaranteed to win if you have the majority, or not even the majority, but close to majority. He could get two-thirds majority in parliament, only having like 38% of the votes, which is actually very important in the coming years of after 2010, because this is how he secured his power. Because when the opposition is fragmented and you have lots of small parties, obviously the winner is going to be the big party, and that's his party. So it's kind of like a revolving around the center of power that he built up, and it was kind of easy for him up until this election when a totally new opposition appeared.
Right. And what I wanted to ask you as a follow-up to that is, what happened to the courts and the judiciary, since, like, besides the election rules, also one thing that Fidesz era is known for is electing kind of its own loyalists in the system. So did it change, and how it affected basically?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and it's not only the courts; it's the whole state institutions. So wherever you look at, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's the Constitutional Court, whether it's lower courts, whether you're talking about the state auditory systems or anything, any state institution packed with people who are loyal to the system. Just imagine that one of the leader of one of the highest courts in Hungary has no experience as a judge, and just because he's a loyalist, he's put there. And it's very similar to many of the institutions. You need party people. You don't need people who are experts. You need party people there who will do whatever you want them to do. So this is how the system works. And the whole system has never been about policy, has never been about carrying out sensible changes, the whole system is built around power, holding on to power, clinging to power, and keeping it forever. So this is basically it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a textbook villain politicians kind of expanding the court system, but also kind of limiting the powers or how much they can actually choose or change. I mean, the courts and the judiciary system, of course, and checks and balances. And one more thing that comes to mind that Orban is usually praised about by his allies around the world is his economic management, and he is sometimes portrayed as a very strong economic manager. However, data shows that the country has become basically a hub for crony capitalism. I also read the new study by Johan Norberg for Cato Institute, and it was mind-blowing for me. So can you tell us more about actually?
Yeah, and definitely. And I was also very happy to read his piece because I was also mentioned there with some of my articles, and I helped him along the way. And yes, and a lot of people, especially in the United States, mistake Orban for a conservative and think that, oh, you know, Orban is a conservative. He has nothing to do with conservatism. Actually, the first 10 years of his rule starting in 2010 was economically good, but not because of his management, but because of the EU money that was coming. So what I usually joke with is now he has run out of other people's money. That's why the economy is not doing very well now in 2026. But this is really the case. He has never been able to govern in a sensible way. He got to where he is now. I always thank my friends in Germany and the Netherlands and France and everywhere for supporting from their taxpayers' money how he built up his system. But yeah, I mean, there is no economic miracle, none at all. And when I read even some pro-free market think tanks' assessment about Hungary's economic freedom and tax policy and so on and so forth, I'm stunned in some cases because I just read. I don't want to name the institution because it's really a serious institution, but where they get their information from is not necessarily serious because, you know, they look at, for example, corporate tax. Yeah, low, but there are 52 other taxes, sometimes not even called taxes, but called contribution, which is not a tax, it's a contribution, and a lot of different techniques to collect money from the taxpayers. Or what I experienced a couple of years ago, as I was a self-employed entrepreneur in Hungary, and in the middle of the year they changed the taxation system for self-employed employees. Come on. Why don't we have investment coming in from other countries if we are such a good country economically? Because there is no predictability of what will happen the next day. I mean, who the hell would want to invest in a country where where your property or whatever can be taken away overnight?
Yeah. And I also recently heard that EU has frozen some funds that were supposed to go to the Hungary due to some procurement irregularities.
That's sorry for the interruption, but that's exactly what shows us now that he's unable to do anything without what I call the free money that he has been receiving. And unfortunately, I mean, if you, for example, look at other examples, because other Eastern European countries also received money from the European Union, but they could use it in a much more sensible way than the Hungarian government could. And back then, 30 years ago, Hungary was really at the top of the list of the Central Eastern European countries as far as economy, livelihood, and everything was concerned. Now we are at the very bottom. So that's how we got there. Although the money we received during the past 16 years was enormous. I mean, unprecedented amount of money, enriching the cronies and the kleptocrats. And somebody froze.
Yes, I think we lost Mariam. So let me ask the next question. So, with all the cronyism going around, what happened to all the institutions that are normally supposed to check that? What happened to the, normal systems of check and balances over the course of Orban's long rule?
Basically, what I described related to the institutions where the friends of these cronies and friends of the government are getting their places, there is no checks and balances in Hungary, basically. We just heard a couple of people coming out in the past 2, 3 weeks who have been working under the Orban government in different institutions, and they are now telling us the stories of how they were not allowed to check people who ran businesses close to the government circles, close to the Orban family, and so on and so forth. So there is basically no check of where the money is going, who is responsible, and we have seen unprecedented amounts being literally stolen by politicians. A very famous case is how the former chief of the National Bank and his son got away with billions of Hungarian currency after he was discharged, and then nothing happened.
And even with all of these like structural advantages locked in, Orban somehow still managed to move against like the free press, civil society. So I wanted to ask you how these non-formal unions play a big role in checks and balances, and why is Orban specifically trying to control them? Why isn't controlling the state and the government institutions enough?
Well, the answer is quite easy: total power. If you don't control anything, you don't have total power. And remember what I told you he experienced in 2002, what it's like to lose. If you don't want to lose again, you have to control everything. And as it started with the free press, it started with print first, started with the national television, national radio, and so on and so forth. And also, although we are living in the internet age, we have a lot of independent media outlets online. But for example, mostly in the countryside, you don't get print media that's not pro-government. You don't get in the countryside a radio station that's not pro-government, and not to talk about the television and so on and so forth. Plus, hell of a money they spend on advertising on different social media sites, different websites, and so on and so forth. And one more thing, you asked about civil society. Now, this is a very interesting thing because normally civil society is something that is sponsored by people, individuals, and so on, not government. However, Orban came up with in my opinion, a very pro-Russian, not pro-Russian, a very Russian type of recipe on how to manage civil society. That is, let's make our own civil society. Let's help them. So we have a lot. I would like, if you just looked at the statistics, so there are lots of NGOs, lots of civil groups, all run by the government. Some civil society groups that are still there are struggling with finances because it's very difficult to get financing from abroad. It's basically impossible, and even from individuals, once you start supporting a group that's anti-government, you might get in trouble with the tax office, you might get harassed by some other agencies, as it happens. It just really happens.
And can you describe to us, like for an ordinary Hungarian, for example, that is somebody that represents a dissent, for example, has opposition thoughts or is a part of the civil society opposing certain things that are happening in Hungarian politics, how were their lives affected by, for example, the foreign agent law that was introduced, basically everything that led to absolutely halting the civil society and any form of opposition to the government?
If you allow me to, can I say a personal example of of what happens to people, because I think my example is some of you might have heard it before because I've talked about it before, but even when I was a member of parliament in 2015, 2018, and I ran again for re-election, that was 2018, I had really good chances. I was up in the polls 2 weeks before the election, I think 11 points. And it was, oh God, I'm winning. It's like I was very satisfied with what the job we're doing, and so on. And then what happens to people who oppose the government? Then came a very nasty smear campaign against me. So I was everywhere on state media, and they claimed that I received millions from a socialist politician, and this is a picture, Zoltan and the socialist politician having dinner, which proves that he got money, blah, 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 blah. Now, Mariam, the point is, I wasn't in the picture. But they ran a campaign in the propaganda, so, I mean, it was impressive in a way, because people believed, even looking at the picture and not seeing me, that I was there. And that's when I knew that I was losing, because I just didn't have the resources to go against the machinery of the government. And although, you might win a court case later on, saying, oh, sorry, we smeared you and we were not right, but you lose an election. This is what happened to me. And for like ordinary people, it can be even like, it can cut into their livelihood much deeper in a way. I mean, I always say that many Hungarians have already voted with their feet. 700,000 Hungarians have left the country in the past 1.5 decades. That's a lot. I live in Spain now, for example. So I'm coming to you from Spain and not Hungary. But we are very hopeful, those of us who live abroad, that once we can go back and live in a normal country, but many of us have voted with our feet. And all these harassments are going on through the tax agencies and all the institutions that they're controlling. It's very similar to some of the other illiberal countries close by.
Speaking of which, you said voting with your feet, right? And I just wanted to ask you, what is the sentiment among immigrant Hungarians around the world about the incumbent parliament, about the prime minister, whether they are more supportive or less supportive of them? And is the government actually doing anything to hold their voices? How are the elections basically held in different countries? That would be my question.
Well, that's a very interesting story, because we have to differentiate between two types of Hungarians living abroad. Those who live around Hungary, in Romania, Serbia, Slovenia, and so on and so forth. So ethnic Hungarians who are very happy with Orbán, because they got the citizenship, Hungarian citizenship from him, and so on and so forth. Even different laws apply to people who don't have a Hungarian residency card, but live abroad as ethnic Hungarians. Those who have a Hungarian residency card but live abroad, another 500,000 or more Hungarians, have totally different. They cannot vote by mail. They have to go to an embassy or consulate, which makes it pretty hard. For example, if you live in, I don't know, Inverness in Scotland, then you have to go to. There is obviously no consulate in Inverness. You have to travel hundreds of kilometers, and this is the same here in Spain. You have 3 places in Spain that you can vote. You can vote in Barcelona, in Malaga, and in Madrid. If you live in Bilbao, for example, well, you travel again. So yeah, but the sentiment is also, again, very divided. As I mentioned, those who live around Hungary are happy with him. Those of us who have migrated in the past decade, I would say 90% of these people, like me, are not happy. So that's in a nutshell, but it's a longer story, definitely.
Yeah, thank you for covering that. I want to also touch on a bit more on the party that may end all of this, because right now why we are talking about this and why the elections are so widespread and everybody's talking about it is because one of the opposition parties, TISZA, according to a lot of polls, is actually gaining majority support from the decided voters. So I wanted to ask you, for those who don't know, what does TISZA party stand for with their manifesto, and what is their main promise? Who is the guy that leads them? It's Peter Magyar, ex-Fidesz member. So I wanted to ask you, for all the listeners, to explain better who they are and what they stand for.
Okay, so as you mentioned, Peter Magyar is the new Messiah. I don't like this word, but he is the Messiah in a way. He comes from Fidesz. He came out 2 years ago. Actually, he's the former husband of the former Minister of Justice. So they got divorced, but and he realized the disillusionment and disappointment of Hungarian voters, because 4 years ago, when there was an election, there was already this disillusionment. The problem was that the then prime minister candidate did not understand that the voters have had enough of the opposition too. It wasn't only Fidesz, but the opposition too. So he didn't want to get rid of the old opposition parties. He wanted to work together with them. Peter Magyar realized that if he is an anti-establishment figure, and by establishment I mean Fidesz and all the other parties, just throw everything into the bin, get rid of all these politicians, and run on a totally new platform and explain to voters that, I have this one goal now: get rid of the establishment, get rid of Fidesz, build a new party, bring you a new transition, similarly to 1990. And this is what people wanted. So, a lot of people started complaining at first, oh, you're not making any concessions with the so-called Liberal Party or Socialist Party or whatever, Green Party. And he realized that he doesn't have to. It's not the parties you have to be friends with, it's the voters. And he could address a lot of disillusioned Fidesz voters as well. And then he automatically got all the opposition voters. So what we're seeing right now is, among decided voters, there's a huge gap already. I think the last one I've seen was 54-36 towards TISZA, which is quite impressive. However, we still have 5 days, and as I don't like to say, but anything can happen in 5 days. It's a pro-Russian and Russian type of illiberal kleptocracy, meaning that, look, I have to explain it to you, but maybe to others in the audience. What's the alternative of many of these politicians who are sitting in parliament at the moment? If they get out, they might end up in jail. If that's the case, if that's your alternative, you'll do anything to stay in power, right? And by anything, I mean anything. The thing is, I mean, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen some false flag attempts by the Orbán government that, oh, there's a bomb threat in Serbia. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. There's Ukrainian convoy of, money convoy and so on. Lots of these things. The good thing is that a lot of us have warned democracies that this is going to happen. There's nothing new under the sun. This is what the Russians are doing. And when the Russians are involved in a campaign directly, this is what their best student will do as well.
And he was inside of the system, right? We mentioned that he was a Fidesz member. And does this kind of make him more stronger to dismantle it, or more uniquely positioned, or does it raise more legitimate concerns about whether he will actually change the institutions and whether he will actually rewrite the story of Hungary?
Look, I think he's, first of all, a political talent, because I was skeptical at first because of the issues that you've brought up. Yes, he's coming from Fidesz. There are a lot of us who got disappointed by Fidesz long time ago. But look, he realized 2-3 years ago that things are not going the way that he had imagined, and I believe him. I mean, and a lot of people believe him that he will rewrite the laws in a way that we can have, for example, normal elections in like 4 years. He can rebuild the institutions. The bad news is that in order to do that, he needs a two-thirds majority. Otherwise, there's no way he can do that. So a lot of people are now rooting for him getting a two-thirds majority so that he can carry out these changes. But I I have a personal connection as well in a way, not to him, but there are a lot of people in his campaign staff and also a couple of people that I know who are running for member of parliament who I know personally, and I trust these people. And when they joined the party and they joined with their faces, I realized that, yeah, I trust these people. I like these people. I know what they think. I know what they have been thinking for the past decade. So that's when I decided that, yes, this is a good cause. And we're not sorry, Mariam. Sorry, Mariam. We are not talking about ideologies, because in a normal democracy, you would start asking the question whether he's conservative, whether he's green or social. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. I mean, what matters is he capable of defeating Orbán? And yes, if the answer is yes, that's a good thing.
And I can also on a personal level relate to kind of everybody in the opposition uniting against something that is so oppressive and already doesn't fit into any ideology, right? So I think that is one struggle that all of the developing democracies or deteriorating democracies have. We don't have the luxury of choosing any particular ideological party. But I wanted to ask you, since you already mentioned that TISZA would need a two-thirds majority, right? And this is the system that is a legacy. And Orbán himself has very heavyweight allies, right? He has Donald Trump and the US leader on his side. He has Vladimir Putin. He also has the whole electoral law. And the polls might show the lead for TISZA. But we've been here before with the Hungarian politics. I just wanted to ask you, how is Orbán fighting back, and is winning even possible under this, basically?
And you forgot to mention the Chinese as well. So he has Orbán has the Chinese on his side, and all the money in the world. Actually, J.D. Vance is in town today. He's in Budapest today. So just to reassure his friend, the sovereignist torchbearer of the patriotic movement, Mr. Orbán, that he's supporting. So putting the jokes aside, look, Orbán looks very desperate and miserable at the same time, because he knows what's at stake. He knows that he has been very, very useful for the Chinese, for the Russians. I'm not going to mention the Americans because it's a different story, but still also for Trump as well. But just imagine that you are in two groups, like one is NATO, one is the European Union, and you are the one who is trolling the systems. You are the one selling secrets directly to the Russians. You are the one whose foreign minister is live streaming the council meetings to Lavrov. So Orbán has this, I would say, misery, or I don't know, that if he loses, will he lose his friendship with Putin? Will he lose his importance to all this the patriotic movement and so on and so forth? So he looks very miserable, but 5 days is 5 days. Anything can happen in 5 days, unfortunately. I mean, really anything.
And let's say Magyar wins on April 12th and he inherits a state in which judges were appointed by Fidesz. Universities are also run by Orbán, and there are some permanent foundations and loyalists. And the media landscape, we already covered this. The civil society is completely dismantled, basically. So what can TISZA government actually do? And from your experience, what are the most important steps that the new government should take to fix the things that need to be fixed?
Okay, let's take one step back. Because winning, even with a two-thirds majority, doesn't mean that you're going to govern. Why not? And this is a very tricky question, because for another 3-4 weeks, the old parliament is still, and the old government is still in power, which means that for 3 weeks they have the opportunity to change the whole system of governance in Hungary from a parliamentary system into a presidential system, which means that, oh, we lost. Let's pick another president, a new president. Oh, Orbán, Viktor Orbán, you look good. You'll be the president for 5 years. We give all the powers to you. There are precedents in the European Union of strong presidential systems. And the parliament is, and the prime minister are just there as ornaments. So first you have to get there. And that's then answering your question. Yeah, he has to rebuild everything. He has to pack the courts. He has to get rid of all the cronies. He has to get rid of all the party people in different branches. So there's a lot of huge tasks. And one other thing that all the governments have failed to do in the past 36 years is to reveal the agent files from the communist era. Because I remember during my term when I was in parliament, it was only 3 years, but I remember that through those 3 years, we brought up the question many times, but Fidesz was always unwilling to reveal who was a communist agent back then in the 1970s and 80s, who might be now working for them. Probably. So I'm really expecting that to happen, because this is something that happened in many Eastern European countries, but never happened in Hungary.
And what, like, Hungary has definitely become much more than a domestic story. It is, everybody's talking about Hungary's relations with the EU, and it's setting an example. So how are these elections, and why are these elections important for the European Union, for the Hungary-US relations, and the whole Europe-US relations in general? So what would you say is the importance of these elections?
Well, there are a lot of issues here. First of all, the vetoes that Orbán has posed in the past couple of years in the council, especially related to Ukraine and other things, but mainly about Ukraine. So he's the one who is like this, I don't know, this I'm not saying system error, but in a way, he's the one who doesn't want to grant the unanimous EU votes for different issues that are really important issues nowadays for the European Union. In my opinion, he is mainly interested in dismantling the European Union. And you know, we all know that the EU is not perfect, but it's really far from a lot of things that we as free marketeers stand for. But at least it's a community where, you know, if you belong there, you respect the rules. And once you start disrespecting the rules, and once you want to rewrite the rules and disintegrate the community, you don't have a place there. So that's one thing. Why it's important for the United States? It's another interesting matter, because in my opinion, right now, the present US government has the very same intention related to the European Union as Russia and China. They don't need a strong economic competitor on the global stage. So they might be much better off having 27 independent countries, but we know that this is not how we want to live in the European Union.
Understood. And I want to, before we wrap this up and go to the conclusions, give the audience members also an opportunity to ask their questions. We already have some of the questions coming in. So Tamar Kutateladze asks, I know this is not directly related today, but Orbán and his government are very close to the Georgian Dream, which is also a populist nationalist party in Georgia. So he's the only one in Europe who communicates this with them. What would your comment be about this? And another question from her was, do you think that the vice president's visit today is going to affect voters in any way?
I'll start with the second one because it's an easier one. It's a no. Like voters don't care about the American vice president. It's just a fantasy of Orban that all the relations that he's building with Trump and Vance are gonna pay off. The average voter doesn't care. In connection with the Georgian dream, yeah, I mean, jokingly, I would say that Orban likes football players, and but that's another sad story. Also sad because of the fact that you guys also had an opposition that most of the voters were unhappy with, and you're closer to Russia, and you're not part of the European Union, which is another hurdle. But it's just I'm not saying it's just an obsession of Orban to help illiberal friends. It's the homework given by Putin. Okay, this is our group, that's their group, and let's stick together. So that's as easy as that, in my opinion.
And Yangolan also asks, do you expect Orban to flee the country? I guess this means in case he loses the elections.
Well, I would say no, because that would hurt his image back home. So I don't expect it to happen. That's another question, how he will face the charges against him and his family when things really get there, if they get there.
And we have one more anonymous question. We still have time for questions if somebody from the audience wants to ask anything. But it is about the Open Foundation because they funded Orban's campaign back in the 90s, and now they don't seem to be liking each other. So what happened there? I guess the question is about the transformation of the relations.
Well, at the Open Society Foundation, just put it correctly, is the George Soros Foundation. And Soros is a Hungarian person who has helped Hungary along the way before the transition, also during the transition and after the transition. So we received a lot of help in form of grants, money, and everything. And Orban himself was a member of the first Soros scholarship group that had the chance to go to school in the United Kingdom, and his party, yes, the question was correct. His party was also financed by the Open Society Foundation. What happened? Very easy. Orban never stood for open societies, never stood for real democracy, and the foundation was representing just the opposite, and they had to get rid of him, of the foundation. I remember during my term in parliament, that's when the Hungarian government voted on getting rid of the Central European University, also funded by George Soros. And I remember billboards with his face, with George Soros's face, that he's the evil. We should hate him. It's really. I mean, you should come to Hungary to see it, especially during campaign season, because you see all these posters and the government telling you who to hate. So in the past decade, we had George Soros, Manfred Weber, Ursula von der Leyen. We had the multinational companies, banks, different people that we had to hate. Now it's Zelensky that we have to. So it's like 1984. Let's hate somebody. It was just so good.
And since you mentioned that Orban has never stood for open society, I would like us to more touch on that as well, since he's often praised again by his allies that he is extremely open-minded, he's good with everybody, he's all about free markets, as we already mentioned. So what do you mean exactly by he's not for open society? What are some of the moves that he's done that are completely contradictory to this?
Well, in an open society, you don't get rid of the free press. In an open society, you don't get rid of civil society. In an open society, you mentioned free market society, you don't start to nationalize. You don't start to have the Hungarian government and state buy up things from successful business people. You don't even allow businesses to leave the country just because they disagree with you. And it's really like a mafia state. You have I mean, you have the top, that's him, the boss, Don Orbán, and all his capo heads reigning in the different constituencies. And I mean, I hope there will be consequences one day, because what they have been doing is just not democratic and nothing that resembles what you and I believe in, and probably most of the audience would believe in.
And to end on a more pessimistic question, we have one more from the audience. In case of Orbán victory, what is a realistic reaction we could see from the Hungarian people? Would they accept the results, or would we expect some protests to happen? Would there be the claims about the election rigging? What would we expect realistically?
Mass migration. So mass migration, as far as protests are concerned, well, you guys know, my Georgian friends know that, yeah, you can have protests every day. The government doesn't care about it. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, you can have protests, but I would say that about 1 million people would leave the country.
Understood. But hopefully we don't have to, or you don't have to in this case, and the Hungarians don't have to. But we are supporting the Hungarians in this battleground right now. And thank you, Zoltan, for the interview. This really has been a very interesting and insightful one. We are keeping our fingers crossed for April 12th. And you are going to be joining us for LibertyCon as well, which is going to be happening in April 24th to 26th in Madrid. So if anybody from the audience wants to hear from Zoltan more about the elections, which results we will already have by then, it will be a very interesting talk with him. So I encourage everybody to, of course, join us. But thank you again, Zoltan, for the interview, for this opportunity, and we will be seeing each other very soon.
Thank you, Mariam, and thank you for the audience as well. And I'll see you in Madrid in a couple of weeks. Thank you.